giveaways, gender reveals, and Saturday night at the movies? This week is extra good. Hey there, Fiber Junkies! Welcome back to the Color Cauldron. I'm Johanna, the owner and dyer behind Potion Yarns and host of this podcast. And today I have a very special video for you. It's our Saturday Night at the Movies monthly segment. This is my favorite segment that we do on the podcast. We just started it this year in 2019, and it is so fun, and it's been really popular, and I'm so happy that you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. Every Saturday night at the movies, we pick a film that features knitting or fiber arts of some type, crocheting, spinning, embroidery, sewing, etc. And we do a little movie review, and then we pair a pattern with it that is reminiscent of the era or has something to do with the film or the project in the film. Usually these are just little scenes or snippets where you see someone knitting in the background, or you see somebody winding wool or working with an embroidery hoop or something. It's usually not central to the plot of the movie, although we always look for those as well. But it is a really fun little extra tidbit, and it introduces us to some really cool films. This month, we are pairing our star of the month from my monthly yarn club, which is Katharine Hepburn, with our Saturday Night at the Movies. So I chose a Katharine Hepburn film that features a knitting scene. It actually has a couple knitting scenes, so extra treat for us. There's even more knitting spotted in this one than usual. So I wanted to give you a quick little intro to Katharine Hepburn if you're not already familiar with her. Most people are, even if they're not really old movie buffs, but just a little extra information. First off, no, she's not actually related to Audrey Hepburn. It's just a coincidence that they have the same last name. They're not actually related in any way that we're aware of. Katharine Hepburn was a stunning actress who really got her start in movies in about the 1930s. She was fairly young at the time. She is actually from America. She was born on the East Coast. She has a really unique accent that is a little bit hard to place exactly, but it's kind of like a Boston type accent, a little more upper crust, kind of highbrow, which she cultivated while working on her acting career. She was classically trained and also appeared quite frequently on stage throughout her career before heading to films, as well as she would often take hiatuses from the screen to go back and do things on stage. And she actually enjoyed over 60 years in Hollywood as a career. Isn't that wild? Like, she was active right up to the time of her death, and she made an amazing amount of films and an amazing variety of films. She was one of the more versatile actresses during her day, and she was one of the serious actresses who took her craft very seriously, so she was willing to play the good gal, the bad gal. She was willing to play a bit part if it was a good one. She was willing to wear whatever, do her makeup however hideously for whatever type of role she had to do in order to really own the role and really do it well. She was very well known for her longtime relationship with her frequent co-star, Spencer Tracy. The two were never actually married because Spencer Tracy was a devout Catholic and he was married to a woman already. So when they started their affair, he and his wife were not super close, but they were still married, and they stayed married throughout that time. And did not get a divorce because of their religious beliefs. But he and Katharine Hepburn had a long affair, and they actually made many movies together, and it's really fun because you can see in their films how much they genuinely cared for each other and had a great rapport throughout the years. They really worked well together, and I think what makes their on-screen partnership so dynamic is not the fact that they were romantically involved, it's the fact that they were friends. You can just tell that the two were like really close pals, and they really genuinely loved each other as buddies and friends in addition to romantically being involved. So that really stands out in all of their films that I've ever seen of them do, and I think I've seen most of them now. So they actually made a whole bunch of films. I forget how many, but it's quite a few. And Katharine Hepburn actually had a rough part of her career early on as well. So she was getting really popular in the 1930s. She was doing quite well in the 1930s in a lot of her films. She did a lot of dramas and kind of more serious films. Things like Sylvia Scarlett, which explores cross-dressing in the early 30s, which is something that most people today don't think of there being those types of themes back in the 30s, but there definitely were. They were just a little bit more subtly discussed in the movies because of the production code. They weren't able to be really overt about a lot of those things. But she did a lot of great dramas in the 1930s. Stage Door is one of her best ones, in my opinion, from that era. There's just a whole bunch of really great movies that she did. However, by the end of the decade, she was starting to fall out of favor, and there's varying opinions on why that was, but she was not very popular. She was also not a very conventional beauty. So if you look at the other actresses that were really popular at that time, she had a very different look. She was a gorgeous woman, but she had very sharp features. She had very kind of a pointy nose, and she was very tall and Amazonian compared to a lot of the popular beauty ideals at the time. She just was really unconventional and different, and while many people found her stunning and beautiful, she wasn't the conventional beauty, she wasn't the conventional actress, and she suffered a bit from bad publicity because she was very independent and very strong-willed and very strong-minded, and she didn't shy away from speaking her opinion. She did not really like the press. She famously was a little difficult around the press. She found them too intrusive, and so she frequently, while she didn't hide like Greta Garbo did, she also she would give him a little bit of a hard time. Sometimes people would ask her questions in an interview or something, and she would give not totally truthful, kind of snippy little answers, almost like, ask a stupid question, you're going to get a stupid answer. She wasn't really into pandering to the press and trying to get people to like her. She was just kind of what you see is what you get kind of a girl, which I really admire, but it's hard to build a career that is built off of the adoration and interest of a bunch of fans when you aren't really that interested in pandering to them. So she went through a rough time at the end of the 30s and into the 40s a little bit. So she actually became labeled box office poison for several of those years because her films started to do very poorly at the box office. Even ones that were amazingly good and critically acclaimed just didn't make that much money. So for a few years she was really struggling under this label of box office poison, and then she had a comeback hit in 1940 with Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart. She made The Philadelphia Story, and it was not expected to be a hit. And she actually had a little bit of trouble getting it filmed and released at first because she was box office poison, and she was struggling to find a leading man who she admired and thought could handle the role, who would work with her, and also a director who would work with her and allow her to have more creative control over the film. But she finally did, and it is a phenomenal film. Jimmy Stewart is great in it, but really, between Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant, they steal the film together. And to everyone's surprise, it was a huge success and started her climb back to the top. And shortly after that, she was back on top and really doing well. And she had a pretty successful career the rest of the time. She would take little breaks every so often to go back to Broadway and be on stage, or just take a little bit of time off, but she continued to do very, very well. So today's film that we are doing with Katharine Hepburn is called State of the Union. It was filmed in 1948, and it stars Katharine Hepburn with her love interest and friend, Spencer Tracy. This was one in a series of films they did together in the 40s and 50s, and then they also did Spencer Tracy's very last film they did together, which was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in the 1960s, the late 60s. So that's also a fantastic film, which I highly recommend you watch if you've never seen it. But so they worked together frequently up until his death, and they were just a dynamic screen pairing. People loved them together. They were both excellent actors, and then you put them together and their chemistry was just fantastic. State of the Union is a little bit of a different film. It is actually a drama, and it's just kind of very, very different. It was after World War II had been over for a couple of years, so it was in the late 1940s, and it was a political drama. So it dealt with politics, and it was a bit of an idealistic film. So the plot centers around Spencer Tracy's character. He's an aircraft tycoon named Grant, and he's a self-made man. He's started from nothing, built a huge business, now is making tons of money and is really successful. And he gets talked into running for president. Even though he has no political background, he's very outspoken about his views, and he's because he's basically a celebrity, because he's become a tycoon and made a lot of money, and he's a self-made man who lived the American dream. He's kind of an icon for a lot of people and someone they look up to. And so he has a bit of a platform already to speak, and he started talking about his ideas of how the world should be run. And he's just a very straight shooter, plain talking kind of guy. He doesn't play politics or games. He just says what he thinks, and people like his ideas and feel like he's one of them. He's just a good old-fashioned boy who made it great, and he's got some good ideas for the country. And so his longtime girlfriend and mistress, Kay Thorndike, who's played by the incomparable Angela Lansbury, convinces him that he needs to run for president. So she has got some political allies who are looking for a new presidential candidate to back, and they are struggling to find someone. She manages to convince them to give this unknown guy a try. She convinces him that he would be a great president because his very strength is the thing that makes him think he can't do it, which is that he doesn't have any political background or training. So they're going to sell him on the idea that he's very much the fresh-faced newcomer to the scene. He's not jaded, and he doesn't have a checkered political past. People trust him because he's just the friend of the worker and the normal everyday guy, right? He's not a politician, and he speaks out against the politics that are played in Washington and the way, businesses are buying politicians and all of that. Sound familiar? Basically, when I was watching this film, the whole time I was like, the same concerns that they have in this film, both on the politician side of how they're going to sell this guy and get votes and control things, and the people on the other side, the voters on the other side, all of their concerns about there's too much money in politics, you can't trust politicians because they just promise everything in a campaign and then they don't deliver once they're in office. All of those same things are literally the same concerns everyone has nowadays. So in a way, it was slightly comforting to be like, the world gets crazy, the world gets less crazy, more crazy, etc. But some things remain the same, right? But it was also kind of discouraging because it's like, oh man, we still haven't gotten that one fixed. And I'm sure that's been going on since well before America was even a country, much less now. But anyways, so there's that common theme going on. And so he decides to run for president. In order to run, back in that day and age especially, they decide that he needs to reunite with his longtime estranged wife, Mary, who is played by Katharine Hepburn. So they are married in this film, but they have not been on speaking terms for many months, and he's had this mistress off and on for quite some time. She knows about it, and we come to find out that she actually still really loves him and is kind of jealous, but she's giving him the cold shoulder because of her pride, and she's trying to make him jealous by kind of flirting with other guys, but he's not really paying attention. But they decide, everyone agrees that for his political career, they will come together and present the front of the happy all-American family with their 2 kids and everything else. So they do this, and his girlfriend, his mistress, in the meantime, while she is his mistress, but it's very clear that she cares much more about politics and her career, and kind of helping to be in on the manipulating background of putting a politician in office and all of that. She cares way more about that. Her ambition is much higher than her romanticism, so she agrees to step down and not be seen with him anymore, kind of distance herself from him so that any rumors about them will be quieted and he will look like he's the good, solid, upright citizen married to his loving wife with his 2 children and all of that stuff. So they go on the campaign trail. Van Johnson plays his campaign manager. He's a little shady and shifty, but he's there. And they start going on the campaign trail. And really the story is about the slow corruption of this idealistic man. He has all these ideas and he has all these morals and principles and everything that he wants to have happen. And that's how he gets convinced to run, because originally he's like, I'm not a politician. I would not be good at this. I'm just a businessman, right? But he gets convinced to run because they managed to convince him that his ideas are super, super good, and so wouldn't he want to put those into action? And if he waits for the politicians to do it, they're never going to do it, right? So he might as well do it. So he starts to run, and on the campaign trail, little by little, they manage to get him to soften the message here, or change a few things there, or pander to the crowd a little here and don't bring up that one thing, or maybe, really harp on this other issue for this other crowd because we really need to get votes. And so you see this gradual decline of his compromising here and there, and in the meantime, his wife Mary is seeing this happen and is, slowly, she agrees, okay, I see why we have to do this, but she just gets more and more discouraged as they go along, watching his gradual decline into eventually it's full-on compromise, just reading the speeches that someone else wrote that tells the voters what they want, that gets the big businessmen who are going to make all the campaign donations on his side, et cetera, et cetera. And then he starts to realize that he's becoming the very thing that he was fighting against. So that's kind of the premise of the movie. It's all about, the political game and compromises that we make and how much are you willing to sacrifice to get what you want. And is it worth it to sacrifice your principles in order to effect change? Or should you stick to your principles and run the risk of not being able to actually have any power to do anything and actually bring that change about? So it's an interesting conundrum that the film kind of puts forth, and something that I think is really, really timely. Like I said, I think these issues are the same things that are going on in our politics today. I am not going to say anything about his actual political views because, first of all, I don't talk politics on this channel because I don't really like talking about politics, and it doesn't really matter what I think because we're here to talk about knitting, so it doesn't really matter. Also, because he doesn't have a super clear, he gives some very specific ideas in the film, many of which I disagree with actually, but some of which sound pretty good. But it's not a very clear, one single platform, which I think is a strength of the film because they didn't want to come down as oh, he's definitely a Democrat or definitely a Republican or whatever. So I think that's pretty good, but I think that's not really, to me, what came across was there was one scene where he was talking about some of his very specific ideas, and I was like, well, that sounds stupid. Well, that would never work. Well, they tried that and it didn't work, or, oh, well, that one sounds pretty good, I guess. And I started realizing I was getting really caught up in the minutia of whether or not I approved of his actual ideas and trying to figure out what his actual platform was. And then I was like, wait, that's literally not the point of this film. That's why they're kind of vague about his platform and they don't give a whole lot. There was only that one scene. They don't really give a ton of detailed information on what his platform is that he's running. It's a little bit more vague. And that's because they don't want you to care about what his politics are. It's the story about compromise and your individual principles and how far will you go, what is it worth, all of those kinds of things. That's really the point of the film. So whether you agree with his ideas, disagree, or like me, kind of agree with some and disagree with others, I think that you should watch it and not get caught up in the actual, what he's campaigning for, because it's a fictional story and it doesn't matter anyways. But I think you should look at the deeper themes about compromise and I think that what this film really demonstrates well is how compromise is never a big, from the beginning, just, okay, throw your morals out the window and do this. It always comes slowly, little bit at a time. Just give them this one little issue. We'll just soften your message here. We'll just change this little thing a bit. We'll just read this one speech instead of writing your own. And eventually you find that you've gone further and further down the rabbit hole, and is it too late for you to climb back out? So that's kind of the theme. Okay, so I loved picking this film. Actually, not because I thought it was that great of a movie. I think it's well done. I think it's good. It's worth a watch. But of all of the Katharine Hepburn, Spencer Tracy films they did together, this is probably my least favorite. I've seen most, if not all of them, and I think I like every other one that I've seen better than this one. This is hands down my least favorite. It's not a bad film, it's just not as engaging as the other ones. I really prefer their comedies, Adam's Rib is one of my very favorites. Pat and Mike is a really funny one. There's a whole bunch of other ones that are way better in my opinion. So I highly recommend that you keep watching their films. And if this one doesn't resonate with you, don't give up because the other ones are even better. But if you like this one, you are going to love the other ones. However, I did pick this one because it had the best knitting scene in it. I actually don't know if there's knitting scenes in any of the other ones. It's been a while since I watched them, so I don't remember. I think there is, so I'll have to go back and watch them, and maybe we can do that at a future Saturday night at the movies. But this one was one that I knew there was a really pivotal knitting scene that I wanted to include. So Grant is an aircraft tycoon, right? So he flies planes, he builds them, his company manufactures them and all that. And we find out in the film that in his youthful days, he was a bit of a daredevil pilot. And so he still enjoys doing some hijinks in the air. He likes to fly his own planes, his own small planes, and he likes to do some kind of crazy flying and hijinks and rolls and twists and all these fancy things. So there's this one scene where they're taking his plane on the campaign trail. So he's got his campaign manager, Van Johnson, and his wife, Katharine Hepburn, and then he's going up with his co-pilot, which is just a guy that works for him, and they're going to fly to their next engagement that he's speaking at or whatever. And he decides to show off and is doing all this silly flying and crazy flying, flipping the plane upside down, doing these loop-de-loops, all this daredevil pilot stuff. Van Johnson is not super thrilled that they're flying to begin with, but he definitely is not cool when they start doing all this crazy stuff. So he's over there literally getting sick and like freaking out and grabbing his armchair rests and everything else and freaking out. Sitting across from him is Katharine Hepburn, who's calmly, quietly knitting away, absolutely calm, doesn't bat an eye. There's scenes where they're flipping the plane upside down and flying upside down, and she just keeps knitting like nothing's going on, nothing's wrong. She's totally calm, and it's absolutely delightful. It was hands down the best scene in the whole movie, and not just because of the knitting, but also because of just her calm, unflappable demeanor and how perfectly she nailed that scene. And there's actually another scene later on where she's knitting on the campaign trail as well. So keep an eye out for those. It's really fun. I can't tell what she's knitting, but it looks like just a scarf. It's like just a long rectangle. So it looks like just a scarf, but she's got several balls of yarn with her. So possibly some color work, although the film is in black and white, so it's hard to see. But that's our knitting scene. Okay, so what is our pattern that we are doing? I had fun picking this pattern out. I wanted something small and quick because I don't know about you guys, but summer is a busy time for me, and May and June this year especially are just crazy sauce. So I'm having a very hard time getting knitting time in right now, and so I wanted something quick and easy and nothing too complicated like a full-on sweater. I was gonna do a really cute little like 1940s top, and I was like, you know what, first of all, I can't get it on over the baby bump, so I won't be able to wear it for like a year or two at least, depending on how long it takes me to lose the baby weight. And so I don't know that I want to commit to something that's really fitted at the waist, like a vintage style, but also I didn't want to commit to that much knitting time, and I wanted to show you guys more than just a photo this time. I really wanted to show you a project, at least in process, if not finished. So I decided accessories was a better way to go, and right when I was struggling to find a pattern and going through all these books looking for 1940s patterns, I found the perfect thing. It's not an actual vintage pattern, it's a modern pattern. However, it is inspired by vintage styles. I recently went to my favorite place to find good deals on knitting pattern books, which is Half Price Books. If you guys have a Half Price Books in your area, I highly recommend you check out the craft section because I get most of my knitting pattern books from there. You can get them for really great deals. So I just got this new book, new to me book. It's not brand new, but it's by one of my favorite designers, Louisa Harding. She's been around for a long time. She got her start with Rowan Yarns, and she's done a lot of really awesome patterns. She has a really girly style. Now she does do some things that are way more classic and aren't specifically girly, but she's really well known for her girly style, and her later patterns all have a very, very girly kind of vintage inspired flair to them. And that's why I love her so much. I got drawn into her patterns years ago and I love them. So this is called Knits from an English Rose. And so they're all patterns, they're all accessory patterns. It's called 25 Modern Vintage Accessories. So they're modern but with vintage flair. And she's got all these amazing patterns in here, little wraps and scarves and bags and gloves and hats and ponchos, and I want to make most of them. But I was flipping through it and I saw this particular pattern and thought, Katharine Hepburn would absolutely wear that, so we're going to knit that. And it's the Loretta collar. This vintage inspired collar is just so cute, and it's a super quick knit, and bonus, it's a stash buster. You don't even need a full skein. It uses worsted weight, so it's quick knit, and it only takes a partial skein for me. 74 yards is what they're saying it took, and I'm not even sure I used a full 74. I used a little skein from Knit Picks called, well, it's the Comfy worsted weight, which is like a cotton and acrylic blend. It's very, very soft, and I just happened to have one single skein in my stash that was left over from a baby blanket I knit last year for a relative of mine who was having a baby, and I had one little leftover ball of this dark red color called pomegranate. And they're only 110 yards, and I think I used just a little over half of it, so maybe like 50, 60 yards for this collar, and I followed the pattern exactly, so I didn't shorten it or anything. I have not finished it because, as you can see, I have ends that need to be woven in. I literally finished the knitting last night, but I did not get the ends woven in, and I still need to sew a button on, but I did all of the knitting. And it's just gonna go around like this, and then there will be one little button at the top, and I have a great collection of little vintage buttons, so I'm just gonna use one of my cute vintage buttons. And then it lays like this and flares out. Isn't it cute? I love it. I can't wait to wear it. So this was inspired by vintage collars back in the early part of the 20th century. It probably started even a little bit earlier than that, but in like the early 1900s to like 1950s or so, little detachable collars were very, very popular, and especially during the Great Depression in the 1930s and then in the World War II era of the 1940s. These little collars became very, very popular because people were on, in the war they had rationing for their clothing, so it was hard to get new clothing and it was hard to get new wool to knit with. You had to reduce, reuse, recycle, and find as many different ways to wear something until it was literally worn out as you could. So one thing people would do is they would have detachable cuffs and collars for shirts, and when the cuffs and collars would get the most wear and tear, they would take those off and replace them with a removable collar or stitch a new collar or cuffs on. So they often had removable cuffs and collars. And that had started in the Great Depression era when people just didn't have any money, so there wasn't a whole lot for that as well. And that was a great way to spruce up an outfit and make it feel new, even though it wasn't actually new. So they used to be more commonly in like white and beige and stuff, but you would also have colored ones from time to time, especially if you hand knit them or crocheted them, and then you could add them to something. Modern day, I have seen several vintage inspired modern books that wear these cute little collars, almost like a necklace. So you can wear it with like a sleeveless dress or a strapless dress or something that doesn't have a lot going on up front. And you can just wear it almost like a necklace, a big collar bib necklace. Especially if you sew little beads on or you use a sparkle yarn or something like that. It can be really, really fun. Or you can use it like they have in this photo. They've styled it in a more traditional vintage way where she's got a little button-up blouse and then she has her collar attached. So it looks like it could be part of the blouse, or it could just be a detachable collar. Now the original pattern, she uses her own Louisa Harding yarn, and she uses a worsted weight yarn that has little beads spun into the yarn. So she didn't have to string any beads. It wasn't beaded knitting, and she didn't have to sew any beads on. It was just in the yarn randomly. And so they're just randomly interspersed. You can see they're not specifically set in any particular place. They're just interspersed along the way. And I really wanted to be able to knit my collar out of something like that because I loved how glitzy and fun it was, but I didn't have any pre-beaded yarn, and I was not about to take the extra time and effort to sew any beads on. And I've actually never done beaded knitting, although it is on my list to try soon, but I didn't want to worry about it for now. And I also felt like Katharine Hepburn to me seems like she would be more of a classic style as opposed to the super glitzy. She could be quite glamorous, and she did dress up in very glamorous looks from time to time, but she was a little bit more of a less is more girl, kind of good quality and really nice tailoring and really subtle details that are just really, really rich and fabulous when she did dress up. And she was also very, very comfortable in really comfy casual clothing, and a lot of her off-screen time just at home. There are a lot of candid photos of her or photos of her in magazines and things at the time, and she was often in slacks and a loose button-up or a cute little knitted top or something. She was just very casual on her own. So I felt like the cotton yarn that didn't have any beads or fancy glitz to it was a little more authentically Katharine's. So that's why I chose this one. Also because it was what I had in my stash. But I love it. I can't wait to get the buttons sewn on and wear it because I think it's going to be really cute. And I'm happy to inform you that this entire collar, knit on size 7 needles with worsted weight yarn, only took me a couple hours. I did it in one evening. I was watching a film with my husband, and I think it took me about 2.5 hours tops. And there was a slight break in that for me to put down my needles and go grab a snack and eat while I was watching the movie and then pick them back up. So yeah, I bet 2 hours or less you could have this thing taken care of if you're a relatively fast knitter. If you're a slow knitter, it might take you a little bit longer, but you could still easily do it in less than a day. So that's another thing. It makes a great quick knit for gifts or just instant gratification. I needed this. I have been working on some larger projects, and while I am loving them, I really needed instant gratification, so this was perfect. So that is my pattern for now. I will put a link to the book below if you can still buy it online. If not, I will try to find some kind of, I'll try to find somewhere where you can still buy it online. And then I will see if there is a pattern. I haven't checked it out yet, but if there's an individual pattern for the collar on Ravelry, I will also put a link to that. Otherwise, if you get the book, it should be in there. And again, that collar is called the Loretta collar, girl's name, Loretta. And it's really great and a really quick knit. So I hope you guys enjoy that one. So for those of you that missed it, last week we did a video where I announced that we were going to do a gender reveal for our new baby that's coming in October this week. And I did a giveaway where everybody was welcome to participate, and you tried to guess the gender of our child. And it didn't matter whether you guessed it right or wrong. It wasn't about actually guessing right. It was just a way to get you guys involved and kind of have some fun and get excited about Baby Potion that's coming in October. So everybody who commented on the video last week before the deadline was entered into a giveaway, and we also did a second giveaway on Instagram. So exact same thing, exact same rules. Everyone who comments gets entered into a random drawing, and then we just picked a name. So there are 2 separate prizes and 2 chances to win. But I wanted to show you the yarn that you guys are going, or that the winner is going to win of this giveaway. We have 2 really, really special skeins that came from the Mad Science Lab, actually. They weren't listed in the shop yet. These were ones that I just had in backstock inventory, but they're really, really awesome. First off, we have this little 50-gram skein. This is a yak silk blend. It's not something I normally carry in the shop, but I had some a while ago, and I just did a few little skeins of it. And this is the Whiskey Hangover color, which is one of my best-selling colorways. So it's a really gorgeous, deep, kind of amber gold. So you'll get 50 grams of yak silk, and you'll also get 100 grams of one of last year's 2018's Yarn Club colorways. So this was an exclusive colorway that was only available as part of the Yarn Club last year, and it's not in the shop regularly. This is called Skeleton Key, and this is on a superwash merino, alpaca, and nylon skein. So there's just a tiny bit of a halo. It's a little bit of a fuzzy yarn, and it has this beautiful like wine color burgundy and some deep black and grays, and then white with some speckles. And it was probably my most popular club colorway last year. So I had an extra skein of that you'll be getting. So these will be your 2 yarns, and you will also get one of my logo enamel pins. So now Breck is going to tell us who won the giveaway.
All right, drum roll please. Natasha Sawyer.
Yay!
Congratulations, Natasha. Those
Good
are some
job.
beautiful skeins. We're going to get those sent out to you. If you could send us your email address within the next week, and we'll exchange information and get those sent right out to you. And then I think Johanna has something else planned for us this evening.
Yes. So now it's time for the actual gender reveal. And so we decided for this we wanted to make it a little bit of fun and not just say what it is. So we have a special gender reveal cupcake that we're gonna cut into. This is a vanilla cupcake with chocolate frosting, and there's a fruit filling inside that's going to give us a clue to the gender. I don't normally go for gender conforming colors of the like blue is for boys and pink is for girls, but I was having trouble coming up with anything that would be like really, really clear to tell what it was. So we went with some fruit filling, and we're just gonna see what's inside so that you guys can celebrate with us about Baby Potion. Our blueberry fruit is to get a signal boys. And yeah, we're having a boy, guys. It is now time to cast off, and we are done with our episode, but thank you guys so much for joining me for Saturday Night at the Movies. I hope you had fun with this. Please leave me a comment below and let me know if you've seen the film before and what you thought of it. Also, I am always adding things to my list. I have a pretty decently long list started of films and TV shows, but mostly films that feature some kind of fiber arts, and it doesn't have to just be knitting. It can be crochet, spinning, weaving, sewing, embroidery, even just, there's a couple films on my list of someone sitting there just winding a ball of yarn by hand, even though they don't actually do any knitting with it, and that's on the list. So anytime that there is like wool or yarn or fiber crafts involved in any of the scenes of the film, I'm starting the list so we can keep doing Saturday Night at the Movies even after this year's clubs are over, because this is something I started in tandem with the Stars of the Silver Screen Club, but it is not just going to die once this year is over. I intend to keep going with it for a while because it's really, really fun. And so far we have done all vintage films because we are doing our Stars of the Silver Screen Club, and I like to pair them together whenever possible. So far we have just done vintage films. However, I am also taking modern films, and I would love help with my list. So if you know a great film that we've not already done on the podcast, please leave me a comment below with your suggestions for what we should review on Saturday Night at the Movies in the future, and I will check those out. Hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss an episode every time. We do book reviews, movie reviews, we talk about what I'm knitting, we talk about lessons that we learn in our crafting. We're going to have some crochet episodes coming up. We're going to have some spinning episodes coming up. We're going to have all kinds of fun things coming up. Warning, the spinning episodes are probably just going to be me talking about my pitiful attempts to learn how to spin because I'm a brand new spinner. So I don't have a ton of information, but I'm working on it, and I would love to do some for you. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to tell your knitting friends and family about this podcast, because we would love to have even more people join us over here in the Fiber Junkie Corner. We have a lot of fun, and we enjoy spreading the love. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your week, but it is now time to cast off. Love you.